We are thrilled to welcome you to our 2020 Connected Health Summit Consumer Engagement and Innovation virtual conference. For decades, we have been looking closely at consumers' use of technology in the home. More recently, connected health and medical devices have enabled new services for consumers to monitor their health care. This has come in all sorts of new form factors and with monitoring services. The global pandemic has also greatly accelerated the use of health services in consumers' homes. We have seen telehealth services skyrocket. 41% of consumers have reported using a telehealth service in the past 12 months, 3 times greater than the year prior. We are excited to bring you 3 days of discussions focused on consumer use of technology in their homes and the impact of the pandemic on new services. With the support of these industry leaders in the health and wellness space, we are able to host this event. Thank you to our sponsors for their involvement in our 7th annual Connected Health Summit. We have presentations from visionary speakers throughout our conversations and networking discussions following our panels moderated by Parks Associates analyst team. We want to thank these industry leaders in advance for their time. Tori Ames, Dr. Donna O'Shea, Mark Dunning, Jean Wang, Richard Culberson, Angie Kalausk-Ebrahimi, Dr. Yuri Quintana. Thank you for joining us for Connected Health Summit 2020. We hope you find value in each session and in connections made with other attendees, sponsors, and speakers. Use the question tab to ask your questions or to upvote your favorite questions from other attendees. You can also answer polling questions under polls to give your live vote. Our analysts and panel speakers will be addressing your questions and the polling answers during the live stream. Ask your questions early in the presentation, as our analysts will choose the most upvoted questions to be addressed by the session speakers. If you have any questions during the stream about SwapCard, our team is standing by to help. Just drop a message in the chat or message one of Parks Associates team members via the Parks Associates company page. We want to make sure you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors in the smart home space. You can visit any sponsor during the session by navigating to the Sponsors tab, browse sponsors, or bookmark the ones that interest you for later. Contact the sponsor via chat, view uploaded documents, watch welcome videos, and more. Have you created your personal event agenda on SwapCard? Go to the Agenda tab, view different sessions under each date, add the sessions that interest you to your personal event agenda. You can access your personal event agenda by clicking the My Event tab. Export your agenda to your calendar to receive reminders and a direct link to your registered sessions.
Good afternoon and welcome back to those who participated in our session this morning on seniors and independent living. And welcome to those of you who may be joining us this afternoon. I'm Brad Russell, Research Director for Connect at Home. And in this track, we're going to be talking more broadly about how the move toward home-centric care creates opportunities for partnerships among an array of products and services from both traditional healthcare and non-traditional service providers. Now, one of the premises of the conversation today is that this new kind of hybrid ecosystem where healthcare meets smart home, if you will, it will be required to provide all the kinds of expertise needed to improve health outcomes through technology-enabled home care. Now, as always, we appreciate greatly our sponsors who are making this important conversation possible. Please connect with them in SwapCard and our other social channels. And also remember that all of the registration attendees for the Connected Health Summit are available in SwapCard to connect with, and we encourage you to reach out to them. And let me review our conversation flow for this afternoon. I'll begin with some analyst insights as I seek to set the stage about the emerging ecosystem of players and this convergence of traditional and non-traditional services. Following my presentation, Richard Culberson with Cox Home Life will be giving a presentation on our visionary insight around better together, extending healthcare into the home. Now remember this, you can submit your questions for Richard using the questions tab to the right of your screen. Make sure to get them in early so that we'll have plenty of time to get them. We'll reserve about 10 minutes in that presentation for Q&A towards the end. Now, following Richard's presentation, we'll have a panel discussion under the title Evolution of Home Services. We've got a great set of various kinds of service providers speaking to our topic today. We'll also have a Q&A session for that as well, and a couple of polls with the audience. So again, make sure you use the questions tab and then the poll tab to participate in those polls. The polls can be taken throughout this afternoon's track, so you can answer those polls anytime between now and the time we discuss them during the panel session. And then finally, as we've been doing with all of our Connected Health Summit tracks, we'll be offering Zoom networking discussions at the end of this afternoon's session. We're especially grateful for Sprosty Networks to be hosting those conversations this afternoon. Now, let's dive into a couple of observations about this new convergence of traditional home services and non-traditional services to create new in-home care experiences. Now, as we come to this conversation, of course, we do so in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic that is dramatically accelerating interest and actions to protect loved ones, especially older family members. During our May COVID-19 research, we found that current caregivers of an older family member, over a quarter of them had video chatted with a loved one to keep social connection. But even more importantly, I think, for the purposes of our discussion today, that is that 8 to 11% of these caregivers of an older family member had actually purchased some kind of device or system just in the preceding few months. Now, these devices may be communication devices, they may be a system to monitor a loved one's health, or a device to entertain them, or a system to monitor a loved one's safety. But this level of purchasing equates to about 8 to 12 million US households, and it is a substantial level of purchasing in just a few months. Basically, 1 in 10 households bought something to help care for a loved one in the last few months. Now, when we think a bit about home healthcare services ecosystem, one of the things that's quickly apparent is how much it's expanded in recent years as both non-traditional players and traditional players have moved into this space. Now, when we think about the traditional delivery system, certainly we think about all of these lists of types of companies along the left side: home healthcare companies, hospice services, non-medical senior home care, and more. My own wife has decades of experience as a LMSW, as a healthcare and hospice social worker, as a care manager, as a case manager. And certainly this traditional delivery system has a number of tremendous assets when we move into talking about tech-enabled care. They have very clear position as healthcare providers. They enjoy relationships of trust with patients and clients, and a high level of accountability, whether it's to credentialing standards or it's to regulations. They are skilled at assessing needs and relationships among the whole family system. But deploying technology historically in the home has not been their strongest suit. Even health-related technology often requires a whole transformation of their business, the way they're staffed, the way their business models are set up. And so it necessitates looking at other kinds of partners that can enter this space. Now, on the kind of opposite end of the spectrum, we find a range of new partner services that are moving into various aspects of tech-enabled home care. On our panel discussion this afternoon, you'll hear representatives of MSOs and broadband services, home security providers, telco services. And then, of course, more recently, we've had a strong move by major retailers, both brick and mortar as well as online retailers, moving into smart technology and health services, both in the product side as well as the installation, support, and service side. The tech giants, of course, have made significant moves in these spaces. Then you have a variety of manufacturers, such as the device manufacturers or the systems manufacturers. They could be PERS systems. And then finally, you've got new services such as Uber Health, smart transportation services that are moving into health space. And finally, new channels, such as builders that are developing senior living facilities or active living facilities and others. And then, of course, payers, healthcare systems who are sometimes providers and payers, and consumers whom some have described as the new payer are all part of this expanded ecosystem of products and services. Now, when we think about these new service providers entering into this space, we can identify a variety of assets that they bring to the table, expertise that help kind of complete the value chain necessary to bring these new tech-enabled care services to market. Certainly, we can think of a lot of these brands as brands that are very familiar to consumers. And we know that when consumers are familiar with the brand, there's a high trust level, there's a confidence level. When they're interacting with these brands in other aspects of their home, or they're purchasing services or devices, then there's a certain comfort level and confidence in these brands. Also, many of these services are already in the home. They already have a relationship with the consumers. They've installed devices. They're providing services, and consumers have a track record of trusting them with technology. One of the greatest benefits of kind of consumer-facing services from the consumer electronics or technology-enabled space is that they typically have a deep understanding of user experience. I think throughout this conference, we've heard repeatedly the critical nature of usability, of onboarding consumers, of helping them understand the devices and how to get the most value out of the devices and the services, and to troubleshoot when those hiccups happen. The other thing about these kinds of non-traditional service providers is that they're often very skilled at consultative selling. Now, people in the traditional healthcare space don't like to use the word selling, but what I'm really talking about is this understanding of a kind of a consumer-centric experience so that they can try to understand exactly which use cases, which needs a household may have, and then personalizing the experience in a way that helps the end users and their caregivers or circle of trust get the most value out of the experience. Many of these service providers also provide the convenience of bundled billing. And so again, it's that simplified ability just to pay for a variety of services in one way or one place. They have successful recurring monthly revenue business models, which are so critical in these kinds of connected technologies that have ongoing costs. And so they require business models that do require subscription fees and monthly fees to offset those costs to make the service sustainable. And finally, they're often very adept at ongoing support. One of the issues often with these kinds of products and services is that discerning the very root of the technical problem in a home can often be very difficult. It could be in the network, it could be in the device, it could be in the user control device, like a smart speaker or a smartphone or a tablet or a computer. It could be in something else going on the network that's disrupting the experience. So the degree to which these services are adept at that kind of level of support and oftentimes have a greater level of visibility into the home network is a very important asset for these kinds of services. Now, let me provide a quick overview of where we are today with smart home adoption and why this sweeping trend is so important to home-centric care. For about a decade now, U.S. households have been steadily introduced to a wide range of smart home products and services that leverage wireless sensor connectivity, cloud computing, control apps on smartphones, tablets, and computers. From smart security devices and thermostats to lights and locks to network cameras and smart speakers. So the current level of adoption is quite substantial. In our most recent research, we find that almost 30% of U.S. broadband households own one or more from a specified list of devices. This list is about 20 core smart home devices. And so that we ask consumers, do you own one or more of these? Almost 30% own one. Year over year from 2018 to 2019, that was an increase of 21%. So a substantial growth. Now, of course, there's a long tail of connected devices. And so we also ask consumers, do you own any connected device without having to specify one? And so with that question, we find that almost 40% of these US broadband households now own something that they would describe as a connected device. Again, that category grew 19% year over year from 2018 to 2019. Smart speakers, of course, have become almost ubiquitous in US households. Now over 40% of households own one or more smart speakers or smart displays, as touch interfaces and screens have been integrated into the smart speaker experience. It's opened up a whole new range of use cases. That adoption of smart speakers continues to kind of hockey stick upward. Year over year in 2018 to 2019, adoption grew 32% to that plus 40% level. Now, home security systems have always been very important for smart home automation in the US. They form something of the technological backbone to the smart home experience for many households. Over a third of US broadband households now own some kind of working security system. A portion of those have interactive services and smart home automation support. But that security system adoption level grew 17%. Which was the largest jump we'd seen in a number of years for the security space. This is really important because when we finally look at home control system adoption, which is at 18% of US households, that the lion's share of those home control systems today are those that are integrated with security systems. So when we think long-term about supporting tech-enabled home care, activity monitoring for the elderly, smart home automation for the disabled or other use cases, this notion of systems that are built on the back of home security is a very, very important vehicle. It's a system that consumers understand that these devices are in the home, the systems are in the home, and these services are already in the home. Now, let me talk just briefly about smart home automation use cases more specific to health and care of loved ones in the home. If you were with us yesterday, one of the things that you heard Kelly with United Healthcare talk about is this kind of vision casting about the future where we're using ambient computing. That is, that we're using sensors that are already in the home. We're using computing power that's already in the home. We're using control systems and hubs that are already in the home, and that these sensors really can serve multiple use cases. So where for one household, they just have a basic home automation use case, for another household with someone in need of care, they also become a mobility solution or an accessibility solution or a socialization solution. So when we think about things like smart speakers, just in recent years, we've seen what a tremendous impact smart speakers can have on simplifying the user experience. So that whether we're talking about the elderly or people with developmental disabilities or other disabilities, that smart speakers are really simplifying the experience of just controlling technology. That it's much simpler now. There's much less friction. That people have to spend less time or effort trying to understand how other apps work or how a variety of apps might work together. But they can simply ask Alexa or Google Assistant to do a task for them. Similar, we've seen in the health space how companies have now worked with some of these providers to provide proactive notifications, so that rather than simply smart speakers responding to a user's command, that they can now be used in reverse to be used for reminders for medication adherence or for doctor's appointments or which home healthcare agency is going to come by the house today, or they can be used proactively for check-ins on health status. So smart speakers are becoming increasingly important for those that maybe have some kind of disability or access issue. Smart lighting, we know that a good number of falls in the home are caused by elderly people getting up to go to the bathroom perhaps in the middle of the night. Smart lighting solutions that can be triggered by motion sensors or other kinds of sensors can make moving around the home at night a much more safer experience. Smart door locks and IP cameras and video doorbells, these devices represent kind of a cluster of devices we would call access control systems. As more adults have a range of caregivers coming in and out of the home, whether it's home health care or it's just senior care services or hospice workers or a rehabilitation and therapists, that these kinds of devices enable a person inside the home to see who's at the door, to authorize entry. If they're disabled and they can't get up and physically answer the door themselves, then they can have much more control of the whole experience themselves remotely from any point in the home. Their caregivers as well can have a record of who has come into the home and when they've left, how long that they were there. And so these devices have an added layer of value for these health-related use cases. When we come to safety, security, and activity monitoring, one of the things that Jennifer shared this morning is that one of the number one features of an independent living system that caregivers want is all of these kind of safety related devices that protect against fire and water damage and gas leaks. And so these kinds of devices, again, have an even greater sense of value and urgency when we have vulnerable family members that are at risk of being hurt in some kind of safety critical experience. Audible alarms in the home can be used for a variety of use cases. Many people today are kind of hacking their own solutions for something very unique. I've shared before that I've put an audible alarm in my son's bedside at college because he's a type 1 diabetic who lives alone. And so if I know that his blood sugar has gone low in the middle of the night and that he's not responding to text or to phone calls, that I can signal an alarm that can do a much more effective job of waking him up in the middle of the night. Not that he always wants me to do that, but it's a life-saving activity. And so these kinds of audible alarms or sensors, there's a wide variety of sensors now available to these kinds of systems whose data is not only perhaps security system data, but now it becomes very critical to activity monitoring. So we think of open close sensors, motion sensors, pressure sensors in doors and beds. All are indicative of the way people are living inside their home and whether their activity pattern is a normal, healthy pattern of behavior or whether it is indicative of some kind of decline or some kind of anomaly that needs attention. Certainly PERS with fall detection, an increasing number of connected devices are a critical part of safety and security. Smart medication dispensers, smart appliances, for instance, stoves that have shut-off valves when the burner has been left on. We know that household fires are an increasing problem as people age and perhaps if dementia has set in. And so safety features of these kinds of connected devices are very important. And then finally, kind of a newer area of health use cases with smart home automation is really around comfort and indoor air quality. So certainly smart thermostats have been important to smart home automation for a decade now. They're the most highly adopted device. But increasingly, we're seeing other kinds of air quality and comfort systems, such as air filtration systems, smart UV purifiers. In the era of COVID-19, we're seeing more connected devices and systems designed to sterilize air or sterilize surfaces in the home. In addition, smart humidifiers and dehumidifiers are very important to people with respiratory illnesses. And so these are just kind of a wide cross-section of health use cases that can be built around existing smart home devices, many of which are increasingly already deployed in the home. Now, another aspect of deploying these kinds of services that I mentioned earlier, and that is this notion of really careful planning for all aspects of onboarding and support, that this is a critical element of a go-to-market plan for deploying new technology in the home. We know, for instance, that durable medical equipment providers traditionally are often accustomed to a kind of deliver and done mindset. There is support offered, but they don't have that kind of consumer-facing electronics experience where they've really learned the important lessons about the onboarding process. Though, of course, self-installation is on the rise and devices can often be drop shipped to a home, over half of those who have set up devices themselves experience at least one type of setup problem, and 35% of people experience two or more types. Now, we know that the most common problems are things like difficulty connecting these devices to the internet or a router, difficulty with actual physical installation of the device, or difficulty configuring the settings. While no one problem dominates, that there's, over half of people are having some kind of these problems. And these problems translate into returns of devices to manufacturers or service providers. For those who've experienced two or more types of problems, the return rate can often be 25 or 30%. Similarly, people will replace the device with another brand. Brands take a tremendous hit when they have a bad onboarding user experience. And we know from our own research that when consumers do have a bad experience with the initial onboarding of a device, their probability of using that brand again goes down dramatically in the future. So these kinds of experiences are really important to get right. And similarly, we can think that as the complexity in the home increases, as layers and layers of devices are integrated with one another, as the data from various kinds of sensors and devices is shared across systems, that these kinds of partnerships ultimately can enable a much more unified experience. So when I talk about unified experience, I'm talking about multi-use of sensor data, so that I don't have to have as many different types of sensors in our companies providing sensors in the home, but I can use some basic set of sensors for a variety of different purposes. That the control experience in the app can be unified. A lot of us have experienced, for instance, what Apple Health has achieved with its health app. It is staggering today, all of the metrics and the services that are integrated into one centralized place. In my own experience every day with my wellness data, I think about how my Omron connected blood pressure cuff data goes directly into the health app, that my weight scale data goes directly into the health app, my pulse rate, that my blood sugar is uploaded into the health app, that my smartwatch keeps track of all of my exercise and all of my related activities. And all of those visualizations are available in one place, and I can share that data sometimes with other providers or other people who I care about. So this is an example of how these kinds of next generation partnerships really enable a much more simplified, seamless, and unified experience. Now, let me make some just final comments about benefits for connected home health services themselves. I've been talking largely about consumer-facing benefits or caregiver-facing benefits, but we certainly see the rise of a number of new and both legacy providers that are specifically seeking not so much a B2C value proposition, but a B2B value proposition for the range of traditional care providers that I mentioned in the very beginning. So when we think about how home care services specifically can leverage this technology for their own operational benefits and their own efficiencies, we think of things such as, just improved quality of care through sensor-based monitoring. In our prior discussion today, we heard a lot about COVID-19 restrictions on home visits and how now homes with sensors in the home can improve the quality of care by remote patient monitoring and other kinds of increasingly kind of AI-enabled experiences where anomalies to people's vital statistics or to the ways you're living their home can be spotlighted quicker. We heard earlier about the need for a baseline of what is a healthy pattern for any individual person. And so again, sensor-based monitoring helps provide that before, during, and after some kind of health crisis event. Certainly these care services can provide more proactive and more preventative care. They can identify these declines and these anomalies, as I mentioned. They can operate more efficiently, enable to how they triage the daily needs of their client base and how best to optimize the allocation of resources. We know that many of these services struggle with staff and staff turnover. And so the more efficiently they can operate and organize and commission their workers, the more value they bring to the care. Just the reassurance of the families that are in the caregiving circle by providing data-informed updates in an automated way really improves the quality and value of the care. And ultimately, home care services all benefit from prolonging the time, especially an elder person can stay in their home, often to much better cost savings for them and their family. Of course, all people don't live in single family homes. All people don't live in private homes. And so the value of these services for senior living communities is becoming increasingly important. That as people transition into these communities, they often want the same kind of home care benefits in a facility. And so a lot of this technology enables a continuum of care that is familiar and similar. As we've already heard today, there are many new providers that are incorporating socialization tools inside the facility so that families and caregivers can also communicate much more seamlessly with their loved ones. That they're integrating resident engagement with sensors and automation, again, in a much more unified experience. And then finally, they experience the same kind of operational efficiencies where they can experience staff productivity. They can manage energy in the facility much more effectively. They can mitigate risks and also get collective insights from community-wide data. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to share with you today from our Parks Associates research and from our insights in studying this space in the last number of years. Now it's my pleasure to transition to our visionary insight presentation. We're greatly privileged to have Richard Culberson with us of Cox Home Life this afternoon. Richard is the Executive Director of Home Life Strategy and Operations at Cox Communications. He has over 20 years of experience in the telecommunications industry, and he's currently responsible for leading the strategy and end-to-end service delivery of the Cox Home Life suite of services. So welcome, Richard. Give us just a few seconds to transition to get his feed brought into the platform. Good afternoon, Richard. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Brad. How are you?
Doing great. Great. Your video's pulled in right there. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Brad, and thanks to Parks for inviting me to speak again. And for the first time here at Connected Health Summit. Always enjoyed your Connections Forum and look forward to connecting more and more on the Connected Health side as well. And thanks to all on the call for continuing to drive the momentum for the connected health space. I'm first to admit that many on the call probably have deeper insight into the healthcare space than I do. Increasingly, we have deep SMEs within Cox on our new growth teams and our Tripolo teams. But I wanted to share a broader perspective on how healthcare fits into our broader connected home strategy, very similar to how Brad was describing, and how we feel Cox contributes to the broader connected health opportunity with the assets that we bring to bear. We've developed our strategy over about 8 years from learning and many conversations with payers, providers, industry consultants, and SMEs, but probably almost more importantly from talking with our residential and commercial customers, seeing how they live, going in their homes, talking with them, seeing what their needs are and how their needs currently aren't being met, ranging from all these connected home needs, including how you make it a healthier home, not just a connected home. We firmly believe here at Cox that it takes a broad ecosystem of partners to move this forward, and we recognize that they're assets that we bring to bear and through the learnings that we can table, but also we can't do it alone, and there's many different roles across that ecosystem. My name is Richard Culberson. I'm responsible, as Brad mentioned, for the Cox Connected Home strategy, smart home specifically that we do under the Home Life brand, and also the associated customer operations. So I spend about half of my time with our growth teams building the puzzle pieces and fitting them together as to how we take our new services to market, and the other half running our ongoing business operations, working with our field service technicians, our care organization, supply chain, training, and kind of focusing on that end-to-end customer experience, which I really enjoy because that allows me to look at both sides, both the strategy and how it executes, and see how it pans out to make sure we're pragmatically meeting all the needs that we have for our customers. So I'm proud to partner very broadly within our company, and we have some very unique within Cox because we bring together both our residential and commercial businesses throughout our connected home strategy, included connected health. As we have found, and all of you know very well, everyone has a story as to how they've been impacted incredibly personally with healthcare, whether that's caregiving to a parent, managing their own chronic diseases, working through post-acute care, or even, and especially most recently during COVID, routine health needs that we're now meeting through telehealth capabilities, which is exciting to see. Unfortunately, I'm also no exception to this. Very recently, our family's been managing through several things as well. My father went through congestive heart failure and was surgery and was in a hospital facility for 6 weeks. And my father-in-law was diagnosed with brain cancer. And I've personally felt and experienced what it's like to be so removed and out of touch, both while they're in the facility and in this COVID environment, even when they're home, not being able to interact with them, and the isolation that comes with that, but also some of the forward-looking telehealth capabilities that are coming up. So these recent experiences have really brought together my professional and personal lives to kind of reinforce the criticality of the revolution that we're talking about and really been studying for about 8 years now. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Cox, we are a private family-run business based out of Atlanta. We serve both the domestic communications market and the international automotive market. I will focus today on the communication side of our business, but Cox Auto is a $7 billion business that serves consumers and dealers under many of the brands you might recognize in the automotive space: Auto Trader, Manheim Auctions, Kelley Blue Book, and many others. And then our new ventures team that sits under our Cox Enterprises holding company invests in adjacent industries outside of communications and outside of automotive, where we think there's a huge opportunity. The family still has a huge passion for sustainability, so we invest in clean technologies through our clean tech group, and even healthcare through the enterprises side, and with investments including Ira Health, who's focusing on developing a whole new primary care experience for patients. But on to Cox Communications, we are the largest privately held U.S. telecom company. We serve residential, MDU, and commercial customers. We have a very unique size. We bring a lot of scale, as says here, $12 billion in revenue, but at the same time, we're uniquely small in the space, in the scale of significantly smaller than the two other larger MSO or cable companies in the space. So what we found is partners are quick to engage with us because they see we bring scale to the table, but we're also the scale and eagerness to work that shows through a long history of innovation that we've had throughout Cox. Cox Communications has evolved from a newspaper company to a radio company to broadcast television, and then was one of the first movers in the cable television space. And then as we've been in cable, we are one of the first to move into the broadband space, launching home phone, and most recently, about 3 years ago, launching our home automation service underneath the Home Life brand. Cox is incredibly focused on serving the communities, especially the ones in which we operate. We have long-standing partnerships that have only strengthened here in COVID. We continue to invest heavily in our what we call Connect to Compete, and we've recently launched a campaign of Act of Kindness campaign. We've already logged over 10,000 community initiatives, whether it's making masks or serving seniors throughout the community. So it's a passion that you'll see supporting our communities throughout the company and as it plays into the healthcare space that we're jumping into. So as part of our COVID response, we have soft launched our Home Life Care mobile PERS solution to our cable footprint to protect the increasingly at-risk, vulnerable, and as I mentioned earlier, isolated seniors. We have also launched a national telehealth solution through a Trapalo business we have in our commercial business, both helping traditional healthcare providers in the telehealth space, but also employers as they're sorting through this new world. So Cox is really starting to gain momentum in healthcare, but we've been speaking with experts to formulate the strategy since about 2012. So the learnings that we've had in all these conversations that I've referenced, I won't belabor this too much because Parks does an excellent job of covering this with all the data and they suggested. But as you're looking at the three real takeaways that we've had is that demands and gaps to fill are real. Whether you're talking about aging in place with the so-called silver tsunami, 3 million baby boomers hit Medicare age eligibility each year. Internal research is showing that over 90% of Americans are over 65 want to age in place in traditional residential settings. And meanwhile, while the elderly population is doubling, caregiver population is flat. So aging in place is a critical need that we've seen, whether it's hospital and home and remote patient monitoring. Healthcare providers that are critical to all of this are working off of razor-thin margins, 2% to at best 4% margins, and it's prohibitively more expensive to serve those patients in traditional facilities versus the home. And increasingly, home-based monitoring is successful outcomes. It's proven to reduce the costs, and it's not really driving the readmittances that many were afraid of. Also, obviously, we've talked a lot about, and as previous speakers, on value-based care, payment models shifting from volume to value, and really finally starting to see that come around, as many of us have been talking about for years. But to see these CPT codes come to fruition, and especially the steps for Medicare Advantage leading the pack, some of those dominoes are beginning to fall. One of the more surprising takeaways is just whenever we're talking about one of our healthcare provider partners, payers, industry SMEs, it's very clear that everyone believes that we need to be at the table as a service provider, and specifically what we bring to the table with Cox. What we found is that the traditional incumbents, they don't want to be in the home. It's a very messy place. They're an excellent job at providing clinical expertise in the environments in which they're comfortable, but they're really looking for partners that can lean in the home and support more so than they can as traditional healthcare providers, as well as payers as we go. And we'll talk about in just a minute is what they've said is that service providers bring a tremendous amount of assets. Brad alluded to several of those, but I'll double click into that in just a minute. But probably almost most importantly, the timing is finally expedited. We've talked a lot about regulations relaxing, reimbursements coming through, but also technology costs, servicing all of these in-home devices, building out those in-home devices. It's a lot more feasible to put the devices in the home and have them interact than it has been in the past. Deep analytics, we've talked about the big tech companies, but there's niche players, large players all over. They're bringing AI and machine learning. So finally we have what Mike Bram of our Trapalo business refers to as the so what machines. It's no longer just regurgitating data, it's actually reactively and proactively providing that information in a helpful form to consumers, which is driving, and increasingly with COVID, it's really driving consumer behavior and acceptance. That's this milestone that COVID is really, as unfortunate it is, one of the benefits we're seeing is it's really driving that adoption that we've known we could bring, but until consumers have a feel that they need to move into this space, we typically haven't been able to get that buy-in. So it's tremendous progress through that. So finally, the incentives of patients, providers, and payers are all coming to alignment, not to mention the employers that are now taking more of that burden for healthcare expenses for the patients and for the consumers. So regarding how service providers can continue this, can contribute to the space, when we look at assets that Cox specifically as an example contributes, trusted in-home relationships. Through our broadband service, 6 to 7 out of 10 consumers in our footprint have a relationship with Cox. So we already have relationships with all these people out in the marketplace that's trusted and years long. Now, we've also made huge strides within Cox to improve our brand and really lean into some of those services, whereas Brad mentioned really the specialty care that's standing up and making sure that you're really able to lean into the process is a lot more so than we have in the past. Service provider mentality and resources. Brad alluded to this. We have care facilities, customer care call-in centers. We have a broad network of in-house and third-party technicians. In addition to that, specifically with Home Life, we've stood up customized, specialized services, both for sales, support, and technicians. I think as Sarah was speaking about in the last panel, we finally see that not only is it just a traditional care channel, the specialized needs that are here, we've stood up custom centers and custom technicians who specialize in that consultative attitude and willing to sit and spend time in education and bringing people up to speed, not just technical experts. Leading connectivity. The connected home, connected healthcare, if there's not a reliable source of connection to the home, no matter where you see that coming, that's at the root of all this. And it has to be reliable, because the first time this doesn't work or that peace of mind is broken, that trust is gone. And that's something that's critical. And that's something that we bring to bear and are very proud to bring to the table within Cox. Video, phone, and smart home solutions. Video, when you look at it, one of the big pieces that we've recently launched a Contour 2 service in which we have assets that are brand new to the marketplace. We have flexible on-demand services that can be used to show healthcare assets. We can use this from telehealth purposes. Owning that screen is something that all healthcare providers have shown us is a real differentiator in the space and something that they really want to be able to see. Traditional landline phone, as a couple panelists were talking about earlier, while we think its legacy is also something that's very critical as we move forward. And then really what I'll talk about more in a minute is smart home solutions. And as we're starting to see these solutions that initially started as security plays, we've pivoted into home automation, and increasingly we can turn to connected services, whether we're talking about energy management, healthcare, all of these same end devices can provide multiple end use cases, as Brad was alluding to. And then finally, healthcare provider relationships. On our Cox business side, we've had great relationships with healthcare providers and are a leading provider to that connectivity with our footprint. So we have great relationships and really learned relationships from serving them for years. And actually, when we acquired Trapalo in 2017, traditional remote patient monitoring solution, they brought healthcare IT expertise, HIPAA expertise, and deep relationships with the CMOs, the chief medical officers of these providers, so they know what we're bringing to the table. That brings us credibility and a deep understanding of how we start bringing all these pieces together. So what we're really focusing on now in 2020 and beyond is through the pandemic and through all the learnings that we've gained over the last 8 years, really what we want to do is take all these learning and assets and put them into action. So I'll focus more on the residential side, but when we're looking specifically at Cox Business, I mentioned Trapalo a little bit earlier. Trapalo is, as we mentioned, it's a traditional legacy remote patient monitoring solution, but in response of the COVID crisis, they've launched a bring your own device solution for telehealth, as well as for monitoring solution for large employers. Trapalo has shipped over 100,000 telehealth medical devices since COVID started, specifically to support COVID-19. And this can be even specifically more legacy devices, thermometers, and pulse oximeters. So we're seeing legacy devices. It's an opportunity to start to bring all these pieces together. So meanwhile, our new growth and development team that focus on de-risking our new businesses and active pursuits, they're working on more expansive telehealth trials. So I mentioned, how do we plug in our video solution to make this a more well-rounded solution, as well as smart hospital solutions, a B2B play where we help hospitals track some of the critical assets in their facilities. So looking a little bit more specifically on the residential side of our business, I'll focus some on Home Life and the history that we have behind Home Life. We started at about 2012 as Cox Home Security, a legacy security provider. Well, what we're really excited to do is we saw this opportunity very early on to serve a broader cause and to open up to broader capabilities. So what we did was we rebranded from Cox Home Security to Cox Home Life, reaching for that more aspirational means and really centering on how do you provide peace of mind into the home, because we knew this could open up more doors. So some of the things we've done is we've actually expanded our capabilities in the area and pivoted so that we have an entry-level service for home automation. This home automation service, basically, it tears down some of the barriers that a lot of smart home services have provided by launching a smart home as a service model. So when someone signs up for Home Life automation, they get a starter kit, of a home hub to make the system work, a camera, a light bulb as a secondary use case that they understand, an activity sensor. So they can they can then add on more devices such as thermostats, door locks, smart plugs. But the key point is that these devices are all interoperable. They're controlled through a single app, and they can also be managed automatically by rules and scenes, so that the home kind of takes care of itself. So it starts to be, on yesterday, there's a great panelist talking about security and the role it plays, and they called out that sensors need to be invisible. So that's a big focus that we've put on education and proactively setting up rules for customers so they see that when your 10-year-old comes home from school, the light comes on and the video clip is sent to the phone so that the parent knows that they're home. So we're very proud of this because it takes a low monthly fee, no upfront cost, which is a traditional barrier to the space, and it reduces complexity. So like Brad was mentioning, we help them with a professional install up front. We make sure all these devices work together, and they no longer have to worry about what happens if this breaks. So a lot of the device-centric models, people buy them. Often they don't get to use all the full capabilities, and as Parks research would say, about a third of the people who buy the devices end up having some technical issues within a month. So we're helping to remove and create that peace of mind that I described. So what we found is off of that automation-based service that we've stood up, we can also expand into healthcare. So our first foray into the area is under the brand of Cox Home Life Care. We started with a traditional PERS service, but we rapidly expanded that to a mobile PERS solution, trying to be a little bit more forward-thinking. And we're trying to change the approach to traditional PERS services that are based off the security industry by the new growth team did a fantastic job of building out a caregiver app. So it's not just for the senior, but it also keeps in place information for the caregiver. And that's not just speaking specifically about what if they fall in a reactive state, but proactively, it could tell them if they also have home life automation, what's the temperature in the home? Because we hear stories about seniors not wanting to bother a lot of the caregivers because they think they're already a burden on them, so they don't want to bother them. So they let these thermostats roll up to 90 degrees. So that is one of the things when we're talking to builders, healthcare providers, more of an insight in enriching and really wrapping the entire ecosystem rather than just some of these incumbent pieces. And more importantly, it can build on the existing platforms that we have on a technology basis and the operations that we have. We leverage same call centers, the same technicians, and start to look at that expertise and build on it so we can grow it as we go. So if you're looking a little bit more carefully, the way that we build up this entire connected health strategy is all rooted in what we provide within Cox Residential as a leading connectivity service provider, meeting 60 to 70% of the broadband needs of the customers that we have in our footprint. We've developed a best-in-breed Wi-Fi solution and panoramic Wi-Fi that allows them to control that broadband and really leaning to make sure they have that best Wi-Fi experience. But importantly, what we feel that provides is that's a connective tissue to the smart home that we're building on top of it, whether we're talking about sales, because now they can buy it together and bundle, or support. It's that single throat to choke of not having to worry about, is it my internet that's broken? Is it the connection to my device? Or is it in the device? Wrapping all of these together. Now that was exciting as we started to launch it, but probably almost more surprising to us was we've seen that smart home now is enabling our connectivity. We do a lot of analysis, as you'd imagine, as a telecom provider of what are drivers of churn. What we found was one of the biggest churn stabilizers for our Wi-Fi and our connectivity is smart home. If a customer, one of our internet customers has our smart home solution, their churn reduces by up to 20 to 30%. So we're starting to see that momentum build as we go through. Now, what we're really excited about, as I mentioned on the home life care, but also expanding to broader healthcare pieces, what we refer to now as tele-living, is because now that we're all at home, we work, live, play, get educated all together under one roof. How do we start to enable and connect that smart home with the consumer residential services that they need? Whether you're talking about fire or police, healthcare providers, as we mentioned, starting to make some of those connections. That also extends into energy. How do you connect with utility for demand response and help reduce their energy responses? So when we pull all this together, we hope that those connected services will then pivot back to our smart home the same way that smart home is led back to our connectivity. So internally, the way we look at this is concentric circles. So it's all rooted in when we have the best, most reliable connectivity, that feeds our smart home solution as the next circle out, which then feeds our tele-living services outside of that. And we pull all those together We believe that's a strategy that wins and differentiates us in the space by using all the assets, whether we're talking about technical assets, operating assets, and the people that we bring to bear. So we're really excited about how we can continue to build out on those teleliving connected services and starting to bridge some of those offerings, because one of the most important points, as Brad alluded to, is there's B2C offerings like our home life care service, but also there's a tremendous B2B opportunity. We talk to providers. How can we do hospital in a home to reduce the cost of, right now they said that they can reduce costs by up to 66% by bringing them into the home for the final days post-acute services and bring solutions into the home. All these examples are numerous, and not to mention payers looking to avoid hospital and proactively lean in. All of the data that we collect from our existing passive devices can then intelligently be used as we build out as we go. So we're really looking at this more as a comprehensive connected home strategy rather than single pieces together, which gives us more synergy, more scale, and allows us to be successful at some of the small, medium, and larger opportunities that we're bringing to bear. So I think I'll wrap at that point. I think, Brad, we can open up for some questions, but I think the biggest part is to say that we obviously cannot do it alone, but we're very proud of the assets we're bringing to bear and some of the early learnings and opportunities that we've been able to chase within Cox, but look forward to working with many of you as you look to expand on that as we go and support the community that's in dire need for some better healthcare solutions as we move forward.
Richard, great, thanks. It's great to hear kind of how Cox has evolved in your strategy. One of the things you talked about is kind of more future oriented about applications of AI to activity monitoring. Of course, you have this this subsidiary that's very innovative in that space. Can you talk a bit about how you envision bringing in some of those kinds of capabilities into the home life care or the smart home automation platform?
Sure. We are admittedly just starting to learn and just dabbling. One of the hardest pieces, as anybody knows about the technical architecture behind this, is bringing the data together. So what we're trying to do is bring disparate data, whether it's coming from the traditional home life automation or security or some of these healthcare pieces and additional third-party devices. How do we bring all of that information in one place? We're very proud to start doing that, and we're doing that in home life care today with our caregiver app, as we mentioned. So the caregiver, what we found increasingly is they're kind of interested, and obviously it's critical to know if a senior falls in the home, but what they really want to know is, did mom wake up? Did they go out the front door and get their newspaper in the morning? It's that daily living that they can't do, and especially in COVID, where they don't have that interaction and they're so remote, they want to know how that works. So we're starting to do that, and we're starting to bring that, I would say that's kind of more data aggregation in simple form. We're just now learning, and we're getting some exciting traction moving forward with Trapalo as to how they do these. I'll refer to it in very layman's terms of the so what machine that Mike Bram often refers to. We're just starting to learn, but we're doing some of the heavy lifting underneath and building some of those analytical engines so that soon we can expose it to consumers. But we definitely don't want to override, because we know if we overwhelm consumers with that information, it's a slippery slope between privacy, as you often talk about, and just simply how often, and we do a lot of studies on engagement, how often do they want to hear from us? So it's that fine line between proactively leaning in without becoming an increasing burden on a caregiver who's already struggling with all the day-to-day tasks they have, in addition with monitoring the seniors.
Yeah, we often hear, personalizing those kinds of experiences is really important to let people kind of determine what they want to know, what frequency, what kind of nudges. That makes a lot of sense. We have several questions from our audience. One of them is just around, Wi-Fi password security issues, right? So the question is phrased, I believe that consumer smart home solutions will suffer and that consumers get Wi-Fi passwords incorrect a whopping 50% of the time. How does Cox Home Life Care deal with this issue? So how are you thinking about authorization and all the various ways it could possibly be done to address these kinds of data privacy, security, or just a bad user experience because people can't remember all their credentials?
Sure, it's tough, and I think that's probably the most important piece of it. It's an ongoing battle, and it's always trying to improve every day. I think we're very proud of what we've done. There's definitely some gaps to be filled and continue to move forward, because a lot of people said when us as a cable provider moved into the security space of, you can't be trusted with life safety. This is something that's specialized, it's custom, there's a higher demand on this. And we stood up the necessary capabilities to do that. And we are very, very protective of the data that we collect, how we use that data, and the processes that we put in place for passwords. We're very pleased that we are tremendously better off than a lot of the device-centric approaches, because what we found, almost all users who buy a device, unfortunately, never change from a username of admin and a blank password. So what we do is we force that, and we very lock down who has permissions to those. But we also have stood up, actually, we stood up a couple new officers within our company to continue to be vigilant on it. So that's something that I'd say you never win the battle per se, but you're always striving to be a little bit better. But we are proud to how we've continued to improve in the space and protected our consumers as we go. So I think that trust continues to be built and is an obligation we have for moving forward.
Sure. Do you think biometric security, I mean, maybe one possible solution to just making it easier, especially for older adults, fingerprints, the way iPhone uses fingerprint as a substitute authorization once an app has been authorized? I mean, is that
Right. I think it's a great opportunity. And I think there's two things that move at the same time, and this continues for adoption for most of these forward-looking solutions and services. There's a technical timeline and there's a consumer readiness timeline. What we've seen is we're increasing the UIs. You spoke previously about voice. So there's a question of, if voice is the new UI within the home, how do we very carefully protect that and move that forward? So I'll use this. We are just now, biometrics is a little bit further afield for us. But one thing we've been very protective of is we're excited that we use the Contour voice remote to interact with our home life systems. So you can say, turn my lights on, turn my lights off. But we're very careful in restriction on the use cases that we enable through some of these. So when you look at the audiences you're working with, for example, we'll allow a customer now to disarm a system, but we won't let them, but not arm. The same aspect of, we will let them make sure we'll let them lock a system, but we're very careful about how we let them unlock a system. So I think a lot of this on the technical side goes to the use cases you enable and how you recognize the audience and what they're living through. So seniors, increasingly they do have smartphones, and the good news is as more age into the senior population will have that technology and they'll be more native to it, as I think a panelist spoke a little bit earlier, but we're not there yet. I think we need to be very careful about when we move forward, because we can. It's a question of what's the readiness for consumers that engage with the service at the end of the day.
Great. Well, Richard, thank you so much. Hope you stick around with us. People may have more questions in the networking groups later. But thanks again. Appreciate your insight today.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to hearing from the panel.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brad.
Sure. Great. Well, at this time in our track this afternoon, we want to turn attention to our panel on the evolution of home services. Obviously, the theme of this afternoon's conversation has been that there are enormous opportunities now to marry both non-traditional and traditional services, whether those are direct-to-consumer offerings or they're also B2B services. And so we've put together an exciting group of panelists this afternoon. And so we want to give them a chance to introduce themselves. And so first, I'd like you to meet Martin Huddart. Martin is head of Smart Residential at Assa Abloy. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hi, Brad. How are you?
Doing great. Tell us about yourself and about Assa Abloy's role in this space.
Yes, I lead up Assa Abloy's Smart Residential organization. So it's essentially a connected home team. It's a global team where Assa Abloy is a leader in access solutions. So we're the world's biggest lock company. We're also the world's biggest smart lock company. Brands you might be familiar with. Yale is a global brand, been around 180 years, often focused on kind of that full smart lock replacement for your door. Some of you may have heard of August, which is a newer brand based in Silicon Valley that focused on retrofit locks, maybe for apartment dwellers or people who want to keep the key on the outside of your door so you don't change the outside. We also are sort of coming out with a range of storage solutions, so we not only protect your home, but the things that live in your home as well. So in the context of this discussion, three areas that we work in on the right-hand side, there are access control for health workers. We have a brand you see there, Finiro, is a company in Europe that specializes in sort of turnkey solutions for allowing healthcare workers to access homes and have also remote health services. And then also in a couple of months, we'll be launching a delivery box you see on the bottom right, which we have several partners we're working with to enable contactless delivery for things to the outside of your home, not only protecting packages from porch pirates, but also, having that contactless delivery that could be important in the context of this discussion.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Next up, meet Josh Locke. Josh is VP of Sales for Essence. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brad, and everybody else watching. My name is Josh Locke. I'm the Vice President of Sales for North America for Essence USA. Essence Group is a company based out of Israel. We're a global manufacturer and platform service provider in the IoT space in general. We have two different sectors. We've got our security, residential security IoT side, as well as our healthcare side, which is what I'm in charge of here in the US market, or North American market rather, with customers in Mexico and Canada as well. But basically what we focus on is a custom manufacturing of IoT devices. And we also do integrate with other IoT devices into a single platform. Most people don't know who Essence is because it's usually rebranded about 99.9% of the time, or even higher than that, along the way. So we specialize in streamlining the process for our customers to be able to deliver innovative senior care products in the home, and to be able to engage caregivers and stakeholders in the end user's care through the use of, you can see on the screen, I believe, a ton of different safety and as well as activity monitoring devices in the home, and some smart triggering devices, which are really taking off. And I hope to introduce you to some of that stuff that's been beneficial to our consumers to bring to market.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Next up, meet Lainey Moeller. Lainey's Director of Health and Wellness and Strategic Sales at Alarm.com. Hi, Lainey.
Hi, Brad. How are you? I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you so much for including me. And I'm sorry to not be in San Diego with you, but excited that we're all together. Rich, you did an awesome job. So thanks for that too. I am the Director of Health and Wellness for Alarm.com, which is the leading platform for the intelligently connected property, including both at home and with businesses. So a lot of people who aren't familiar with Alarm.com Wellness, that is our health and wellness platform, leveraging Alarm.com's security, access control, video, energy management, lights, locks, water, and ultimately health and wellness. And a lot of people say, so how does a security company really get into the healthcare space? And I think we've had some really great conversations talking about that leading up to this panel. And so really, I've worked with Alarm.com for the past 10 years with all of our health and wellness experiences, including payers, providers, home care opportunities. A lot of our dealer partners, we are a B2B2C play. And so I work with our dealer partners to operationalize health and wellness. So right now we have over 8,000 dealer partners and over 7 million customers. So we're bringing technology into the home or into businesses to support health and wellness and activities of daily living, not only thinking about the health and wellness of the individual, but also of their setting or of an employee in a business setting. So it's the more person-centric side. And really looking at how does our technology ultimately deepen the connection between people and the things that matter most, which is typically their family, home, or business. And so today what we wanted to spend some time with you is really what we're doing at the enterprise level. And what you're seeing here on the screen is both the property and population health management solution. And what's interesting, I would think, with COVID, and I think we'll probably dive into this, is how does that, when it was largely built around a community in a campus-based setting, now translate to in one's home? And how do we ultimately deliver this solution, in a smart home platform with intelligence and ambience and really being able to use AI and preventative and predictive care modeling around data? So thank you for having me.
Yeah, super, Laney. Great as always. All right. Well, rounding out our panel this afternoon, we have Anthony Versarge. Anthony's head of product health and wellness at Comcast. Good afternoon, Anthony.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here. And again, same as Laney, would be great to be in San Diego, but it's great to do this virtually as well. Really glad to be here. So, like a lot of the previous speakers, we've really recognized the importance of connectivity in everything that's happening around health and wellness. And so that is our focus. And, a lot of my focus recently has been on our multifamily properties, which includes assisted living facilities. And especially due to COVID, we've seen a lot of transformation in that industry, and really we've seen them evolve from first trying to figure out how do we actually just cope in this new normal, and how do we really get through this, to now they're starting to think about what's next. We know that this is going to be with us for a while, and that all of us, everything that we do and the way they operate their businesses is going to be different, even after there's a vaccine, and after, the world kind of gets out of this. So what do they do, and where does connectivity play a role? And so we're working on, some next generation connectivity offerings to really enable everything that the industry wants to bring in, and really make it seamless and frictionless to connect those devices to the network. And as Richard had alluded to, how do we leverage all of these data sources and bring them together to provide this cohesive view of what's going on in the home? So we're also, tackling how do we actually do this, again, reduce and take away some of the friction in doing healthcare in the home today. I think, one of the questions earlier was, how do we deal with the issue around not knowing a Wi-Fi password and actually just connecting Wi-Fi devices onto a network? So, within Comcast, we've also seen that an issue. And so we've enabled features like allowing customers simply to say, what's my Wi-Fi password within their voice remote, and having it appear on their TV. So that way, either themselves or a caregiver or professional who's in the home and needs to set up services can actually do that in a quick and efficient manner. So looking forward to the conversation, and thanks again for having me.
Great. Well, Anthony, thank you. All of you represent years of experience in this space. And so I'm really interested, for us to think a bit about, the influence of COVID-19 on the way you perceive this space. Before we turn to the conversation, let me remind our attendees this afternoon, there's a couple of poll questions in the poll tab. So if you take a second to look at those, we'll look at those results in a minute. But Josh, I want to start with you on the whole influence of COVID-19. What insight has this experience given you on the use cases for smart home services, or the way they need to deploy, or maybe kind of new features that should be on our roadmap based on what we've learned from this experience?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I can speak to kind of the traditional PERS space, which is what I consider kind of box and a button type thing, and then I'll kind of get into what our customers are asking of us currently and during this COVID-19 state that we're in. But initially, back in March, everything was kind of shut down, and our customers, we're not service providers, but our customers are, and a lot of them have contracts into government organizations, Medicaid waiver organizations or healthcare or otherwise, depending on the state. And those typically require, professional installation. So there was a time period there where their business was really slowed, and they had to figure out a new way to do these installations, and they figured it out. We helped them out with it as well, to kind of spitball some things. I've been in that world for 9 years, so I kind of understand their pain a little bit. So they were able to do a lot of unique things over the phone, self installations. They're pretty general, pretty easy to do in general. A lot of times the senior's there alone in their home, so moving furniture and stuff like that, that a professional installer may have done in the past can't be done now. And then there's also some that some installers that would actually sit in the driveway and kind of do it through the door. So they had to get creative. And once they got through that, we actually saw a pretty big spike as far as the equipment that they're ordering from us, which translates into the business they're doing, obviously. So we did see a spike there because a lot of caregivers, mostly on their private pay side of things. On the government side, it's limited funding, so it's really kind of first in, first out type of model. But on the private pay side, I mean, caregivers are going, "Oh man, this is real." I can't go see my mom. I better do something. So we have some big players in the private world that's. As far as innovation, our customers are asking for, "Oh, dude, let's take advantage of this. Let's re-explore this activities of daily living and social engagement and caregiver engagement platforms that you have." And we've been spending a lot of presenting and deploying those to our customers as well currently.
Yeah, well, that rings true with a lot of what we've been hearing. The phrase "do it with me," installation services is kind of this new way of thinking about DIY, but with a lot of intensive support. And sometimes service providers are developing new support tools that are more of that. I may be outside the house, but I'm coaching you, I'm guiding you through a process and not leaving you on your own, which seems to be really applicable to the space that we're talking about. Laney, I want to turn to you. You talked a good deal about kind of enterprise focus. How has the COVID-19 experience kind of informed the way Alarm.com is thinking about an enterprise focus and the kinds of things that enterprises need to deliver this tech-enabled care?
Yeah, so I think it's been eye-opening for me personally and also for Alarm.com. I've been with Alarm.com almost 10 years, like I said, and so one of the things I think sheltering in place has so many similarities to aging in place, but just for different populations, and how do we ultimately drive connection and care as a service? And it's been interesting to me to see the role of the camera, but also then of the entire family, and how do we ultimately tie that experience together? And then sort of taking that to different use cases. So like our WellCam, which is our safety camera that has a push to talk button on it. Interestingly, years ago, we couldn't get people to have a camera in their house. It was really something that was kind of creepy and not really accepted. Now, ultimately, with the Do It Together theme and ease of installation, you can send a camera. Now you have a safety device. You've got eyes into the home. And it actually just won a Product of the Year award for Security Today 2020. And I think it was kind of a couple of things to play off of what Rich had said. Password, we could pair it with a smart gateway to be able to simplify the install. We could support that. But then also you now have a connection, whether it's safety, care, even if it's just sort of being able to speak to someone, peek in or speak in. We could also use the intelligence on that camera to be able to look at trip lines and ground zones. Were they up? Were they moving around? So it was a single sensor solution that was easy to get in with, which I think was great. Now, where it then applied to the enterprise, which was also interesting, is when we had hospitals using it as PPE. So they were ultimately limiting the risk of their employees outfitting hospital rooms with camera. They could then peek in or speak in, but also read monitors. So things that we didn't entirely expect, we would then be able to outfit every room at an enterprise level with what we would have considered kind of a consumer play camera in the residential world that now was supporting a population of people during the pandemic.
That's great. So you have this toolbox of devices and capabilities, and now you're applying it to new situations that were even unforeseen.
Totally unforeseen. Like I said, like kind of a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, that's great. I want to turn our attention to our poll questions. We have a poll question on use cases, and that's the one I want to look at just for a second. So if you've had a chance, give you a second just to kind of weigh in on that. We'll update those numbers. We're asking you what health-related use cases have the most potential to be addressed by smart home solutions. Certainly, we've been talking a lot about independent living today. So almost half of you find that independent living is a very strong use case, followed up by daily activity monitoring to 20% and virtual caregiving at 15. I think daily activity monitoring is something that awareness is growing of as we realize more and more capabilities and we see more solutions in market. So very interesting. Anthony, I want to turn to you. I mean, Comcast has a reputation for kind of a big picture way of thinking about ecosystems, and you have a long track record of pulling together all different kinds of players, right, into creating experiences. So when you consider all these use cases, how should we be thinking about the requisite ecosystem of devices and services and data that are going to be required to kind of pull all of this together?
Wow, that's a loaded question there, Brad. I think when we're out talking to all of our customers and partners, the one common theme that we seem to hear over and over again, especially over the past 3 to 6 months, is a lack of really knowing what is next. When is this going to be over? When are we going to be back to normal? What is that going to look like? And what are we going to need to succeed in that environment? So where we've been pivoting our strategy a lot is around, it's a little bit less about how do we solve our customers' problems here and now, because we have a robust toolbox of services to allow folks to do that. It's well known. But really, our customers want to know, how are we going to evolve with them to solve, the problems that they're going to face, tomorrow, next month, next year. And they're really looking for, what is that future-proofed solution? And how can they, move towards a future-proof solution that, can allow them to grow. So they know that, hey, there's all these whiz-bang things that they could be doing around devices, IoT, advanced connectivity, et cetera. But, right now they're, generally pretty cash strapped, in dealing with allocating resources in a lot of other directions. So they're not really ready to make a huge investment in something that's completely unknown. But they know that, hey, if they do get there and if they need something, they want to make sure that they have a partner who can grow with them and who can accommodate that. So that's what we've been working a lot around. And how do we, especially in that multifamily space, how do we, that focuses on assisted living, how can we work with those partners and those customers to say, okay, here's what you need today. Let's go and help you with that. But then how can we put in the right level of plumbing, whether that's wiring, whether that's with the devices that we're putting in homes or apartment units, assisted living units, and leveraging that same hardware. How do we keep that there and potentially flip a few switches to allow it to turn into something else that accommodates those needs that they might have a year or two down the road. And so that might be with additional managed services. It might be segmenting a network. If today that particular facility just needs some pretty limited connectivity capabilities for personal use for guests, some light staff use. And then all of a sudden, they want to grow into something more robust. How can they segment that network out, at their facility, leveraging the same hardware in order to run, IoT, health grade, IoT devices within their facilities. So I think that's really where we're trying to focus, Brad, is how do we, be as flexible as possible for what our customers are going to need in the future.
Yeah, I like that word flexible. Those of us who've been in the smart home space and watched it for a long time know that in the beginning, a lot of people thought that they could just vertically align, right? And they built proprietary platforms. They were closed. They couldn't evolve very quickly. And, the world moved, into much more, we're integrators, right? Bringing in diverse ecosystems of devices and services and data and et cetera. And it certainly seems like the connected health space, is going to have to kind of wrestle with that same question.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Martin, let me turn to you. I mean, I know your role in this space is around access control. What has been your experience that you can really bring to bear on the use of access control, whether it's in facilities or in private residences. Kind of, how do you think about the application of access control solutions in this tech-enabled care space?
Yeah, in the care space, it's interesting. So we have a business that basically provides access control for healthcare professionals trying to get access, typically to the elderly in an elderly home. And before sort of digital access, people were using metal keys, which, as we all know, if you have 10 visits a day and you have turnover of the population of people you're taking care of, that's a lot of keys to manage. So, you can't really put the key under the mat or under the plant pot. So the transition from managing metal keys to digital access has really been shown to save surprisingly 6 to 8% of the healthcare workers' time sort of messing around with trying to get to the property and inside the property that they're going to take care of somebody. So that helps the care workers. It also helps the people receiving care. They don't have to get up. They're typically elderly people who may have trouble getting to the door. And so, that's kind of the basic access benefit. But there's also other benefits that are sort of interesting around really the time and attendance aspect of not only now can you measure when somebody visited and when they went inside the house, you can also know how long they stayed there. So that, the vast majority of healthcare workers are providing excellent care, but there is, some people who might cut the visit shorter than they should. And so you can really get visibility from a system that manages access in a digital way. So that's kind of the basic premise of using access for healthcare.
Sure. Do you foresee, for instance, Assa Abloy developing kind of software applications, access control, kind of uniquely tailored to this space? Or do you have other tools right now that you can repurpose for that?
So really, it's a two-pronged strategy. So we partner with a broad range of companies, many of which are on this panel that are providing broad sort of healthcare solutions. So, but we do have one business, the Finero brand that I mentioned in the introduction, that is sort of going deep in access for healthcare to provide. It's predominantly access, time and attendance with some video care as well, so that we have, like Lainey was describing, some solutions which allow you to remotely check in on people receiving healthcare and make sure they got back to bed, or they didn't fall, that kind of thing. So that's a sort of a one solution that we offer. But typically, I'd say for the majority of healthcare, we make products, our locks are widely sort of in use from partners who develop other solutions in healthcare and other verticals.
Sure. Yeah. Software is not your primary
Correct.
Primary role. Great. Lainey, let me turn to you. I think we all recognize that security monitoring and platform services have been early innovators in applying their capabilities to health use cases, certainly predominantly PERS, independent living. There's a lot of conversation now about pro security monitoring services kind of adapting new lines of business where they're monitoring health devices or providing more life critical event monitoring. What's your take on that? I mean, are we going to see the security industry make significant strides towards medical device monitoring in the health space? And if so, what are the critical capabilities that might be needed?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thought. I think as we sort of touch on COVID and sort of the awareness that's been brought to the space, and even just looking at kind of what you said, Martin, is more and more I get asked by senior living communities, how could I leverage access control ultimately to create an audit trail? So when I think of security that does access and energy management and life safety as a service and connection and care, I think, actually taking care of the people within a home rather than just thinking about intrusion modeling is something they can do very easily, as long as they are really strong in data management, security of that data, but also really artificial intelligence and business intelligence. How do you also then make sense of that data in a way that it becomes a differentiated service of a security provider? And I think that's what Alarm.com has done really well and has invested in this. And like I said, for 10 years is really making sense of what are the patterns of life within a home or a community or a business, whether it's a family member or an employee, and how do we protect the health and wellness and well-being of that person so that we have a good understanding of change, being proactive around behavioral change or routines, and it's really making sense of data and alerting around disruption. So I think that's a big opportunity for interactive security and those that are really looking at the intelligence tied to sensor data and really leveraging that as a differentiated service.
Sure, yeah, and certainly Alarm.com has done a lot with the application of AI and activity monitoring. I suppose the question about health device monitoring is really one more for the central monitoring stations and people that are some that are kind of pivoting in that direction.
I think we are seeing some of that. We are seeing partners of ours that are working with monitoring partners that are doing proactive monitoring. So not just looking at urgent alerting, but starting to make sense of non-urgent alerting. And really, what is the interaction and intervention around that in order to either increase the likelihood that they can remain independent or reduce the costs associated with reactive care? So is that a service, beyond just what traditionally was used for PERS? So I think we're going to see changes there.
Right. Anecdotally, I've heard a number of security monitoring providers talk about the surprisingly large number of push button communications they get on the panel with older adults that are not having an emergency, but it's almost like they just want to talk to somebody. They just have a question, and that's just a point of communication. And so some have reported that they've had to retrain some of their monitoring staff and increase their capabilities and in having just those kind of more everyday conversations with people, that it's really meeting more of a socialization need or
Right.
something like that. So.
But I think that's going to increase with isolation. I mean, if this continues, that is a piece of it. But then also even just routine-based, non-urgent alerting around things that ultimately will lead to risk or loss of independence. So nighttime safety, doors opening at odd hours. And then even sort of to speak to some of the other points earlier is the health and wellness of the home, water leak, remote home management. When we're at a distance, not only am I worried about, say, for example, my mom who lives in a different state, but I also would love to know, like, are her doors locked at night? If something happened, like she did actually have her pool overflow, things like that, like having an awareness of the property that you can also intervene, both personally and as a caregiver. So I think alerting and the intelligence around important alerting and meaningful intervention is really going to be a game changer.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Josh, let me turn to you. When we consider a future where there's a variety of sensors and devices in the home, they're enabling, whether it's daily activity monitoring, PERS, remote patient monitoring. What role do the service providers that you work with play in issues like reliable connectivity, data security, privacy, network management? I mean, there's this whole home networking infrastructure, right? That everything else is relying upon that. So can you kind of just speak to the role of those providers? I know that's not your core business, that's who you work with, but just about the necessity of getting all of that right and how the partnerships have to align in order to make sure that all of that's working and reliable and consistent.
Yeah, it's kind of relates to what Anthony said during his introduction. Our customers, who are the service providers, are really looking for a widget or a gateway that can expand. And as far as connectivity, 4G LTE is obviously the most simplistic way to have connectivity in the home to different IoT devices versus Wi-Fi. But they're looking at also when you start getting into more data going over the cellular network, it starts to become costly. So we have an Ethernet connectivity for primary if there's a lot of sensors in the home communicating through the hub with the cellular backup or you can have the cellular as primary. 4G is pretty fast these days. 5G is coming up too. I won't even get into that though. But what our customers, who are the service providers, are really looking for is to be able to layer onto that gateway, right? So you can have, like I said, box and a button, fall detection. That's a check of the box. You got to have that. But what we specialize is passive, a passive approach to not only fall detection, but a passive approach. Passive meaning you don't have to wear anything. So wireless sensors, motion detectors, voice activation is a big thing, where the user doesn't necessarily have to wear anything, and we can put in place these different IoT devices in the home to be able to, if they say a key phrase like call 911, it'll trigger our voice activated wireless device that can be placed, in the shower, for example. A lot of folks take their pendant off of their neck and put it on the doorknob, take a shower, which is not necessarily a great idea. But layering in other things like passive fall detection through radar technology that we're launching, not wearing anything, just having a wireless device in each room, measuring the gait of somebody. Are they walking? Are they sitting? Are they lying down? And that contributes all through the RF. It's mostly RF in the home through connectivity to the gateway, which is then typically cellular connected. You're not talking about a lot of data there. But when you start getting into activity monitoring, like through motion and door contacts and stuff like that, and you start getting sensor heavy, that's when either Wi-Fi, which we explain the challenges there in the market we're talking about, but Ethernet certainly, you could plug into that, and the range will allow for, basically a 10,000 square foot home to be connected to any of our devices.
You mentioned 5G just kind of in passing. Do you want to say anything about how you think 5G might impact, a lot of the delivery of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we always got to be innovative, right? And the biggest thing is the connectivity part of it. And 5G on an IoT band is very powerful. Today, not a lot of people know that 5G, the IoT band, covers 90+% of the 4G LTE network currently. So we have that capabilities now to use that band or that now. So and it's powerful. The cell modules get smaller, and your battery life goes up. So if you're talking about a mobile offering and stuff like that, 5G is what we're looking at as far as connectivity outside of the home as well as inside of the home. Yeah,
very good. Thanks for that. Well, I want to turn our attention to this question I started with, and that is about partnerships between non-traditional services and home care services that are already in the home. And so we had a poll question. We asked you which traditional healthcare services offer best partnership potential for non-traditional home services. And it looks like generally about a third of you said care management services. Another 22% non-medical senior home care services, 19% home health care services. So while we've had a lot of discussion about, facilities-based care, I'm wondering to what degree each of you kind of envisions traditional providers of home care services, some of these that we're talking about, really lining up in partnerships with service providers to deploy technology. In other words, to be kind of new distribution channels, either just to improve the quality of care for the receivers or to actually operationalize the data for their own efficiencies. I kind of just hear from each of you kind of what's your take on the potential of these kinds of partnerships with home care services that are in the home. And Anthony, I'm going to ask you to start, and then we'll ask some of the others to follow.
Yeah, sure, Brad. It's a really great question. And I think that's one of the areas where these partnerships, could be really, really fruitful. I mean, obviously we've got a lot of great data that we're collecting across all the devices that we have in the homes. And we've got a lot of great connectivity capabilities. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see and have seen is, what are the folks on the other end, what can they do with that data? And in some cases, are they ready to receive that data? We've had conversations with folks and say, hey, we can give you, XYZ insights into, what's happening into this home. If something happens in the middle of the night, we can throw you an alert and so on and so forth. And they've actually backed off of that and said, hey, actually, we don't really want that right now, because if we get that, then we might be held liable if we don't act on it fast enough. And so they've looked at it like, oh, can you actually just give us a report at the end of the month as to what's happening? And so I think there's definitely, there was a time when, we weren't getting as much data. I think we're getting a ton of data now, and I think we're starting to all open up our ecosystems and understand the need for that interoperability. And so now it's really, it's really time for the rest of the ecosystem to understand, what kind of data is useful and how can they ingest it and use it.
Great. Lainey, what's your take on potential of partnerships with home care services, mostly in private residences?
Yes, we've actually seen quite a bit of movement there in the developmentally disabled population. So those people that were requiring one-to-one care, we're working with the State Department of Health, really looking at different waiver programs where you can use virtual care to augment direct care in the home. So really looking at population health management from afar. And so I would say developmentally disabled populations, you're also seeing virtual CCRCs where care is being brought into the home. So anything that can be a caregiving tool that allows them to have better insight, personalized care, preventative and predictive care modeling. That also, for us, there's sort of a combination here. You have to have the right operational model to get this technology in, but you also need the trust and expertise of a caregiver. And so in a lot of ways, it's a perfect marriage if you can achieve that and feed this data then to care providers and ultimately families. So developmentally disabled, we've seen it where you're bringing kind of the community concept into the home with care oversight. And I think too, what we have been speaking about is it is care and connection as a service. It is really sort of the model.
Great. Martin, what's your take on the potential of these partnerships? I know you're largely working through, service providers and platform providers who would attach your device. But just from your perspective, do you see home care services becoming a channel for tech-enabled care like we're talking about, or are there barriers too much?
I think so. I think it will become a channel. I'll say, I've been in this industry probably close to 10 years now, and I think the last 2 years have seen a real spike in the number of sort of integrations of how solution A becomes connected to solution B, and I think that isn't going to be an exception. This is a very specialized area. It feels like there is still a ways to go in terms of tailoring solutions to have very comprehensive sort of integrations today. That's just at the beginning phase, but I'm confident that those integrations, between whether it's locks and broader home automation solutions like many of the panelists represent, I think that the pace of integration between complementary systems has really taken off. And really that's because of, I think, a lack of really a broad interoperability standards for the smart home. So we'll see, maybe chip will change that, but until that happens, I think integrations are gonna increase over the next couple of years.
Sure. Yeah. All right, Josh, you get to weigh in on this one. I'm interested in A, what you think, and B, what are the barriers to collaboration with home care services where they would become true distributors of some of these solutions?
Well, I'll kind of give you some personal experience, which I think is probably the best. So, 15 years ago, I worked for a home care agency in the Metro Detroit area. It was Medicare, Medicaid certified, skilled nursing, therapy type of service, wound care, all that kind of stuff. And I actually partnered with a PERS company here locally, Guardian Medical Monitoring, and we did something pretty innovative back then, and we used it as a marketing tool at that time. So I'm just kind of telling you how simplistic you can look into it, and then kind of where we are today. What we did back then was, we were looped in on, and through fax, a paper fax, if you can imagine that. So we were looped in on for our patient population while we were caring for them. So the 30 or 60 day certification period, we were looped in on whether they had a visit to the hospital. So we were able to kind of check on them. We were in real time. We knew, those type of simple data flow type things for our patients. But we saw the most impact when we discharged them. So we referred them back to Guardian, and they gave them a special rate. And if an event happened again, they had the option to come back and have us rehabilitate them. So it was a huge thing for us. That transitioned me into the PERS world, really, into the service provider world, and now the manufacturing. But fast forward to today, you still have home care agencies utilizing it, not quite in that fashion. They may be using it as a revenue stream or an additional service that they provide at a special rate through another organization, another service provider, branded as theirs, or just kind of branded as the service provider themselves. But what we're seeing today is, our customers who have those type of dealers, if you want to call them, the home care agencies, they're looking for way more things to offer. They need to differentiate themselves, the home care agency, that is, they need to differentiate themselves from their referral sources, the hospital systems that they compete with. So they're asking for the voice activation to layer on to just the help buttons and the regular fall detection. They're asking for activities of daily living, like what Richard mentioned in the previous session, or the preluding session. They're asking for, I just want to know if my mom is up. So we have a wake and well type smart rule that's very basic. In the morning, you can set it, really easy to set. 7 a.m. she gets up, she makes coffee, she watches the Today Show, and the caregiver gets that thumbs up on their phone via text or email or through the app itself. So those are type of things that we're seeing as far as healthcare oriented focus on, kind of layering on to just the standard PERS service.
Yeah, it's great personal experience and kind of a great description of the opportunity in the market. I think there's 11 to 12,000 just home healthcare services companies in the U.S. So very fragmented market. A few big players, but very regional. And it's interesting to think about, what's really going to break through, what kind of combination of partnerships or transformation of home healthcare companies to really, distribute tech-enabled care into the home. I mean, it's got
to be simple too, Brad. I mean, right. You can't to try to get them to do like real tech things. Not them meaning the home care agencies. They know how to pay their bills. They need to pay their bills, but you got to keep it simple when you're trying to partner with these folks, and start small. Start with, the box and a button type mentality, start doing the data oriented stuff behind the scenes. And then you can layer on innovation on top of that. But in my opinion, and my experience, you got to really kind of start simple. You got to walk before you run, but having the ability to layer on a bunch of additional service offerings on top of it is extremely important. Right.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating conversation. As someone who's, as I mentioned at the outset, my wife is very much in that side of the business, and I'm on this other, the technology side. And it just surprises me the difficulties of both of those kinds of business coming together.
Yeah.
Because they own the relationship, with the care recipient and caregiver right now. So it seems like it would be a natural, but there's so many sensitivities involved in that process. Well, this has been a great conversation. We've got a number of questions from our audience, and we want to make sure that we give enough attention to those. So one of the questions that came in early on today, I think actually it's when Richard was talking, was just kind of a more specific question. Someone was interested in specifically hearing impaired care recipients, and specifically what technologies are available, especially around the safety use case, for hearing impaired residents. So in other words, how do you translate fire, smoke, gas leak, these kinds of life critical events through technology for the hearing impaired community? And I'll just toss that out to the group. I don't know which of you might have more knowledge of that space, but any of you have experience in serving the hearing impaired community?
I haven't had as much experience in it, I would say, but we have used creative ways with lighting and colors to be able to alert. More of an automation play, but allowing visual cues that are not tied to sound.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can kind of. I mean, we've worked with some providers, not in our U.S. market, but globally. Kind of like a closed caption type of a provider that have the phones in the home that caption the calls, and we're able to translate that to either actually on the phone itself, or if they have a connection to their TV screen, phone there that says emergency call is being placed, so that they have the acknowledgement outside of the loud, annoying alarm that most of the panels have. They have that acknowledgement and that peace of mind that, I pressed my button and it was acknowledged, and we'll be getting some help. But not too much experience outside of that, right?
Sure. Well, we certainly can imagine all kinds of visual cues, whether it's lighting, fans coming on, things that could help in that process, things that vibrate. So it's interesting. So one other question we have from the audience was back to the platform question. I think it came in earlier when I was talking about kind of open platforms versus proprietary ones. And if I understand this question right, what they're interested in you discussing is kind of the relative value of if it's not proprietary, it's a tightly curated platform that would carry with it the promise of reliability, stability, as opposed to one that's more widely open, where a bunch of different manufacturers could have, SDKs and APIs and kind of plug into it. What are your thoughts about kind of those two platform strategies, specifically in serving, the unique needs of this connected health space? Anthony, can you weigh in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we obviously want to make our core connectivity services. We strongly believe, it's as important as possible to enable folks to connect to, the platforms we provide in the home as seamlessly as possible. Whether that's Wi-Fi, a lot of folks don't realize that our latest generation gateways, the XB6 and XB7, also include a Zigbee radio for IoT in them. Which we're just starting to utilize that. It's something that we're just starting to tinker with. How do we, what are the applications for using this? But, we think there's a tremendous amount of promise there that, by having this one device, from a provider like Comcast, that can be, sort of the source of connectivity for anything that someone has in the home. And it really reduces the complexity and barriers to entry for a lot of folks who want to build, some new type of sensor or IoT device or, wearable. The biggest question is, how do I actually get connectivity to the outside world for this device? And most of the time, the answer there is, hey, I've got to go get, some other hub to put in the home. And so obviously, if you've got that sort of open model where everybody's got their own SDKs and everybody's got their own, devices in the home, you have, 10 different devices, each with their own hubs, to get that connectivity to the outside world. And so we want to enable, our gateway to be that hub in the home. And so provide that common layer that others can build on from both a hardware and a software perspective.
Well, in a related question, and I'll let some of the others weigh in on this one, this underlying issue of network connectivity, reliability, all of that we're just talking about, it suggests that a network audit, is a critical part of deployment of any kind of connected home service. So to what degree are networking audits capabilities a part of some of the services that are deployed, or should they be? What kind of networking audit needs to be conducted?
Yeah. Hugely important. It's an area that we spend a lot of time thinking about for all sorts of devices, because obviously, when someone's having a connectivity to a device that's not optimal, they often don't know, hey, what is the source of this problem? Is it the cable company's problem? Is it their connection into the home? Do I need to upgrade from my 300 meg package to a gig package to get the speeds that I need? Or is it the Wi-Fi connection in my home? Do I have dead spots? Am I not getting coverage across the entire home? So we spent a lot of time really building a suite of self-service experiences into our Xfi experience, our Xfi app, that allows folks to diagnose just that, right? They can perform speed tests and so on from various places around their home. They can test the speed, both from from out in the street, to their gateway, and then also from their gateway to that actual device, to help try to triage, hey, what is actually going on here that's influencing my connectivity. And then we provide a lot of self-help tools that sort of can help folks get better connectivity in their home, whether that's through the placement of their devices, through various our pods and extenders and placement of those devices, and all the machine learning and creating the mesh network that goes into that. So yeah, it's extremely important, and we're trying to enable our customers to serve themselves with that as much as possible to get that optimal experience in their homes.
Yeah, that's great. I've seen like Wi-Fi heat map apps, right? So you can walk around your house and try to understand where the dead spots are and things like that.
Yeah, Brad, I'll give you a perspective on that for access, which is obviously very mission critical for healthcare workers. We actually have a policy where we don't rely purely on the network to get in. So we actually use local communications between a phone via Bluetooth to a lock, precisely because you're not reliant on the network in that corner of the house on that day at that time being active. So it's actually a philosophy of ours for our access solutions for care workers, that they don't rely on the network. It can be done locally via the phone.
Yeah, great point, Martin. And of course, that's common for a lot of security related devices that are doing machine-to-machine communication or something else outside of the Wi-Fi network. So that makes a lot of sense. There's some people who are skeptical of running over Wi-Fi. We had a question from the audience about, is it really reliable enough and strong enough, or should we be thinking of other connectivity solutions?
And a late answer to your last question about the hearing impaired, we actually have an integration with Philips Hue, and I think when bad things happen, the lights flash red if you have the right integration. So I think that's companies that are doing lighting. That's a great option for the hearing impaired, to the lights flash red when something bad's happening.
Right. Yeah, and very easy to set up those automations.
You can do it by many of the solutions represented on the panel too.
Sure. Great. So we had a different question about monitoring cognitive decline. So the question is, are any of you supporting non-urgent monitoring of cognitive decline, which is key in transition from assisted living to memory care? Laney, is Alarm.com and your activity monitoring doing things specific to cognitive decline?
Well, so actually this is like a long time passion of mine. I was on the board of the Alzheimer's Association for 5 years because of a mother-in-law that had dementia, and we used tech to support her. And we really started with things that would be more around wandering, doors opening at odd hours, more looking at sleep patterns, to look at sundowning, where she flip-flopping days and nights. And then we got more into sort of restlessness. So just behaviors, just repetitive behaviors, just kind of that would let us know that she was agitated around certain caregivers and things like that. We do not do as much as far as like brain tests or any kind of puzzles or game, any of that kind of socialization tool. I would say we more make sense of the patterns and behaviors in a home. Now, I will say we typically, in kind of a cognitive decline setup and in an installation, we make sure that everything is passive and ambient, meaning that no user engagement, they don't have to push buttons, they don't need to wear anything. We layer alerts so that we can ultimately, to I think the point you were just making before, a little bit different than connectivity, but more on the platform play side is, to us, we do at alarm.com, we do have an open ecosystem, but it's fairly curated so that we can manage the platform. But we also really are looking at the intelligence that and the layering of alerts. So an example, not necessarily for the hearing impaired, would be more around, like a future state that I think would be really interesting, and this would probably resonate with you for your son, is if he had a low reading in the middle of the night, could that set off his alarm? Something audible that would wake the family up so that they could intervene. So it's taking, instead of being device specific, it's relying on the intelligence of the platform to make sense of data and then have reactions that can lead to intervention. So that's really sort of where we are focusing on, is more of the intelligence and making sense of the data to then provide tools to engage or intervene, specifically with cognitive decline. How do you alert caregivers of potential risk? Those natures.
Sure. And of course, when you have all these sensors deployed in the home for multiple reasons, then you have so much more contextual data to analyze, to look at.
And we're even actually hearing more around even just like proof of life data, like our, what's the energy consumption, our phones being charged, things like that allow you without any to have insight into livability. And that's kind of some of the words that I love that I'm hearing in this conference, is like telehome care, telavigilance, teleliving, things like that, where they're looking at the bigger picture than just sort of a button press at end of life, or, the sickest of the sick, or already, sort of reactive care modeling. It's really making sense of the activity in the home and the condition or behavior that you're trying to support. And then how do you apply the right kind of care based on that intelligence?
We had one question, I'll throw this back out to the whole group. So thanks for that, Lainey. Just about user interfaces, TV versus app, mobile app, laptop or smart speaker. What are your thoughts about, the user control interfaces appropriate for certain populations? Will the TV, become the platform? Is this context specific? So, we're going to live in a multi-user interface world, and solutions need to accommodate, all of it. Kind of, what are your thoughts about the user interfaces?
Yeah, it is, going to be sort of a multi-context world. We've obviously done a lot of work on the TV. It's a big part of our focus. And through the years, with our X1 platform, which has been around for a while and has a lot of robust capabilities compared to a lot of other TV platforms. At first, we kind of said, hey, let's just take, everything that's in our mobile apps and mobile experiences, and let's just port them, directly over to X1. So there's going to be, a mobile app experience and then a companion experience on the TV. And what we found is that it's simply just not the right approach. There are some things that are just much, much better suited as a mobile-only type of an experience. So things that require, detailed configurations, data analysis, and so on, and sort of sorting through data and different activities. And then there are other things that are great that we get, tons of engagement on. On a television experience, things like, watching cameras, getting alerts, especially, in front of folks who are, in front of a television for a significant portion of their day. So some of those more ambient, passive activities, that really goes along the lines of that activity of TV watching, are really much more tuned to that platform. And then, of course, on the TV, we found that it's really critical to have all of that integrated into some sort of voice recognition system. Is just critical. Obviously, you've got a lot of limitations with a typical remote control as far as hunting around for various data and applications, and so that ability to just say, show me my living room or show me my doorbell, something along those lines in a voice remote in that TV experience is really, really critical for having that be successful.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Well, that's going to have to be the last word for this afternoon's conversation. Thanks again to all of our panelists for sharing their insights today. Thanks to all of you who've attended and stayed with us this afternoon. Remember, there are new Zoom networking discussions taking place in just a moment, so you can scroll down on today's agenda. You can find the links to those networking discussions. We have one on business models and one on productive partnerships. So it's a great way to get some up close and personal experience with some of our speakers, as well as just enjoy a little human connection. So again, thanks for joining us today. We'll hope you'll return tomorrow morning for the last day of the Connected Health Summit. Take care. Be well.